Hello, Brad here, just to say we're super proud that the Friday 5pm podcast is sponsored by the Malt Miller, the UK's best home brew store.
We use the Malt Miller for all of our homebrew experiments, as well as tapping them up for advice and binging on their awesome YouTube channel all the time.
That's why whenever we release a homebrew video, we put a recipe kit live on the Malt Miller, so you can brew with the exact same amazing ingredients that we did. The same ingredients used by pro brewers.
So alongside the Malt Miller's nitro-flushed hops, cold-stored yeast and milled-to-order malts, you can pick up recipe kits for our 5 Points Best Bitter, Russian River West Coast IPA, and now the fastest beer in the world, a hazy session IPA that goes from grain to glass in less than 48 hours.
Sign up to their newsletter at tinyurl.com/Malt Miller to get 5% off your first order. With the Malt Miller's amazing customer service and Johnny's 48-hour recipe, you could order the ingredients on a Monday and be drinking the beer by the weekend.
Speaking of which, it's Friday.
It's 5pm.
So enjoy this week's Friday 5pm podcast. Happy Friday, beer geeks. It's that time again. I hope you have a beer in your hand. We don't, because we're recording in the morning, because Bradley is going to have lots of beers in his hand soon.
Oh, mate, yeah, I'm off to Brew London for the day at a trade session. So I'm going to go and say hello to a few people and, drink a few little tasty beers.
It's you are aware that Brew London is sort of the next generation of craft beer rising, where we have a bit of a reputation, Bradley.
Oh, God, I know. Don't I know it? I'm going to try and not knock down any stands today by being absolutely trolleyed. And
what we were doing is we were getting our retaliation in first at Lagunitas before they sold to Heineken. That's why you knocked it over 6 years ago.
That was, honestly, at that point, I just love Lagunitas so much. I was just so happy that I was allowed to pour my own pints of Lagunitas. What happened, Johnny? We'd been given a pretty big privilege there. I think we were quite young in the game, weren't we, in the sort of YouTuber sphere.
So green, so noob.
And all of the lovely guys like the Beer Weasel, and I can't remember the other dude who was running it over here in the UK. They'd all put their trust in us. And they let us behind the barrier that separates your people that actually work there and are not drunk from the punters, and they let us in, and then I proceeded to basically destroy their stand by falling all over it and jumping around like a maniac, drinking too much loopy juice. But
and there is video evidence of this. We've stopped publishing the moments where one of us crosses the line into drunkenness.
Yeah.
But back then we weren't so discerning.
No, we weren't. Definitely weren't. We also like lost our whole camera rig that night, didn't we?
No, that was the next night. That was the next year. That was again. It was the Lagunitas stand, but it was when they had brown sugar on, which is their 9% American brown ale.
Yeah.
And I just at the end of the night, I put my camera down and was chatting to them, and then just walked off without my camera.
Classic. It wasn't like it wasn't a little camera. It was on a shoulder rig, big microphone. Full rig, It was crazy, man.
Yeah,
crazy.
And I don't know what I was thinking, but I woke up in the morning really hungover, picked up my bag because I was going back to the festival because I was actually working it while I was at Cave Direct, picked up my camera bag and it was empty. Like, it just sort of swung up and I was like, oh my God. So that's one of the worst hangovers I've ever had, sprinting back to Brick Lane to check who had my camera.
Yeah.
And I arrived at the Lagunitas stand and the guy was just stood there looking smug at me with his arms folded, judgy.
Oh, God. It was Beer Weasel, wasn't it? The Beer Weasel, right? Is that his name?
I don't remember that. I'm desperately trying to remember his name.
The dude that looked like the dude from The Big Lebowski, who was this old stoner guy that was one of the main dudes.
Oh, that guy, yeah. He wasn't there when you were destroying the stand.
No, he wasn't there then.
No, he was there for the brown sugar incident.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was called the Beer Weasel. I don't know whether he's still at Lagunitas. I don't know. I don't really know who survived that corporate buyout. But
no.
I mean, I was about to say the company's changed. The company's changed and the beer's changed. It's in the UK. It's now 1.2% weaker and a shadow of its former self.
Sad
Anyway,
times.
enough about Lagunitas. Yes, you're going to Brew London. There's lots of what I like about Brew London. Brew London doesn't get a lot of love. Because it is quite corporate, and it is, you get a lot of beer buyers there, which makes it actually really important for smaller brewers to get in front of these people for the first time.
Yeah.
That was where, it wasn't where I had my first pint of Daya, but it was one of my first and where I met them for the first time because they were trying to get in front of the right people. And I think people should be less judgy about it, and we're hoping you'll discover some new guys.
Yeah, man, it's sort of like a bit like the Dragon's Den of the beer world, kind of, as an event. I wouldn't say. I mean, I'm definitely not one of the dragons. I'm not Deborah Meaden or any of the other ones.
Which one of the dragons would you be?
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it?
I think you're Theo because he's a bit of a live wire.
Theo Prophetus. You've got Duncan Bannatyne, who's he's always got a wild look in his eye. That man. I think Duncan Bannatyne has probably murdered people over his life. He's
Possible.
like a sort of I could see him as like a Scottish hard man in a jail yard, just being. He's really little, like a little dude, but he looks wiry. I reckon if he ripped his suit off, he'd look like Iggy Pop. He'd just be sinewy and like, because he's got the health clubs, hasn't he? Bannatyne.
I was going to say he does literally own gyms.
Yeah,
so
yeah. I reckon he's
if
absolutely
he's not,
Iggy Pop ripped in a weird, like, sort of crackhead kind of looking ripped way, where he's just totally sinewy, like a body of muscle, but like totally skinny like a rat.
I think you've thought too much about Duncan Bannatyne in your life. This is
only
starting
then.
to sound a little bit obsessive.
Only just then, Johnny. I've just got a very active imagination. I'm just picturing him in a role of Brad Pitt in what's it called? The Guy Ritchie film where he plays the hard man
in
gypsy
Snatch.
bare knuckle. Yeah, in Snatch. But just put Duncan Bannatyne's weaselly head onto Brad Pitt's body as a gypsy hard man bare knuckle fighter. That's what I'm picturing.
There is no other beer podcast in the world where this kind of conversation would be had. So
No.
I don't know whether you feel welcome out there, but you are welcome.
Very, very welcome. And that goes for you, Duncan Bannatyne, as well.
Who I'm sure is
malice
listening
intended.
while pounding it out in the gym.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard that he listens to it while he's running on his treadmill.
I mean,
That's
who
what I
doesn't?
heard.
It's the perfect place to listen to a beer podcast.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether it's true or not. Obviously, none of that is potentially true, what I've just said.
It's definitely slander, yeah.
Oh, dear.
Right, so anyway, I can't even remember. Where's my notes? God damn it. There they are. Right,
You've
crossover
done some beer
blendery.
stuff, haven't you? Yeah.
Yes, yesterday. Thank you, Bradley. Yesterday, I was at Crossover Blendery, so they're now my local brewery. When I moved to where I live now in Hertfordshire, one of the first things I did when I go to any town really is Google like great breweries, great bars, great pubs, and I was delighted to find that I had a local brewery. It's not your classic local brewery, so Crossover are exclusively spontaneous wild ferments, all aged in barrels. They brew it all themselves up at Elgood's, which is an old real ale brewery that happens to have a cool ship, which the cool ship was never used for that kind of beer before because just all British breweries had cool ships back then. That's how you cooled it. But they now use it for wild beer, both at Elgood's and Crossover now. So they only opened in January 2020, so they're barely 18 months old. So all of their beer is extremely young, and we talk a lot about that in the video that I made because lots of people are drinking their beers and going, "Oh, there's not a lot of Brett character, not a lot of acetic, not a lot of all this kind of funk." And they're like, "Yeah, it's because it's effectively young." Lambic, which if you've ever had young Lambic, it's quite sweet and caramelly, and then it's got that vinegar tang and a little bit of Brett maybe starting to come through. But what was really interesting and what I really enjoyed is they're really interested in British fruit. So they've looked at the spontaneous market, for want of a better word. So looked at Burning Skies output, Wild's output, and fine ales, which we looked at in that video about British spontaneous beer and realised that nobody's really making fruited beers like, Creeks, Frams and all the stuff that the Lambic guys do. So their sort of twist on it is they're always going to use British fruits.
Nice.
And they're always going to really drill down into those fruits. So, they were telling me there's 250 varieties of plum in the UK, and they intend to find the best ones, and fruit seasonally, according to what's available and what could be delicious in their drinks. So it's a really exciting approach to sort of be a kind of fruit forward, almost like cider like levels of fruit forwardness. It's like focus on the fruit and use the beer as the base almost.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it could be
so
a really
something quite
exciting
different
brewery.
from anything else in the UK by the sounds of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had long chats about how you build yourself a niche within a niche without sort of alienating just about everybody. And I think that using fruit's something that we all understand and all enjoy is a really great way of doing that. And the beer that I had in the video, it was a young plum sour, like a sour golden ale with plums, I guess would be the best way of describing it, was absolutely stunning, and loads of plum character and loads of like that really young, spontaneous kind of character. So a little bit of caramel, and there's, I think it's 70% wheat, so loads of kind of cracker malt base to it. It's really interesting beer. But
can you stop saying young plums now, Johnny? Because it's disturbing me.
It's a strange phrase. I apologise. Well, I'm going to start talking about crossover anyway because I don't want to ruin the video. I've given so many spoilers away.
250 varieties of plums in the UK. That's a lot of plums, mate.
It's a lot of different plums.
Wowza.
But, I mean, that's dwarfed by the amount of apples.
Well, I was going to say apples. Obviously, we are the kind of the widest sort of apple producers in the world, right? The Victorians hybridized all the apples and made all these different varieties that have gone around the world now, which is kind of amazing. We must have talked about. I watched a documentary about apples years ago, and I can't find it anywhere now. But it was really incredible. It was all about like I've just said, the Victorians and their hybridizing of apples. When they'd literally go apple hunting and find trees, just a random tree anywhere. And then if they love the flavour, they bring it back and they'd like hybridize it. And you can graft, branches onto different trees. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff with apples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that was a great discovery. We talked about it in our barley video last week about how, those are kind of selections. So you find the best varieties or the best trees and you try to replicate those rather than just letting nature happen. It's sort of low intervention. At the very bottom scale of GM, it's like natural GM. It's unnatural selection, I guess, is probably the phrase for it.
Yeah.
Right, should we talk about the video?
Yeah,
I say the video, your video, Bradley.
My video. Yeah. That's a weird thing to say, but it was just about time to do another episode of Low Brau. It'd been, I think, 3 months since the first one. And we didn't have a video this week, Johnny, so I had to sort of try and smash it out of the park, which you did. Oh, thanks, man. I think it was good. I think I probably recorded it on the hottest day of the year, and I was getting a bit of a fuzzy brain from just being boiling hot. But I think, with the edit you did, I think it kind of came out all right. And honestly, those were some of the most. I know they were Camden. And I don't really drink Camden, but I just needed fridge beers that I could get enough of on the day I was filming. I just had to rush out and get them real quick. And they were so
and obviously
satisfying.
Beer that we were happy to store at 25 degrees.
Exactly.
Wouldn't want to do that to a nice beer.
No, I was like, well, it's gonna taste how it tastes. But they were some of the most refreshing beers that I've had in a little while, because it was quite a laborious day filming that on my lonesome, and then cracking them. It was just great. Even the salty one was very satisfying.
Yeah, that's something that was missing from the video, which was like, remember to rinse your can after a heavy salt bath.
Yeah.
And also the other thing that was missing, which we missed a bit of a trick there, and there's lots of people in the comments saying it, like the major benefit of that salt bath hack is that you can do multiple cans.
Multiple cans, yeah.
So if you didn't spin it, it would be a little bit slower, but you could put, a 6-pack in there, and they would all chill down super, super cold. So it's got a slight benefit over the Cooper cooler.
I mean, the sky's the limit in terms of, like, if you've got a bigger cooler, and you've got more ice and more salt and more water, you can fit more cans in.
Mm-hmm. But it's just basic maths.
Yeah, I mean, I've got, from all of the comments, there could be a small part 2 episode if in the works at some point, because I reckon I could get the salt bath hack to pretty much come down to 60 seconds now. From some of this, it's a big claim. From a lot of the suggestions that have been made, I think that I could speed it up a lot.
Somebody, I can't remember whether it was in the comments or whether it was in our Patreon forum.
Yeah.
Somebody came up with a great way of doing it. If you get those plastic clicky 6-packs,
this is it. Yeah, that's
that
how
could be the great way of attaching it to a drill. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, the full lid plastic 4-pack or 6-pack things. Are they allowed? They do sell those now, don't they? Because animals can't put their head in it, and if they go in the ocean, all that sort of stuff. So
yeah, and it's single plastic, so it is recyclable. Yeah, so they're slightly better than those horrible pulley ones that used to kill loads of animals and stuff. But they're not as good as the cardboard ones that are starting to come out.
That's it, right? So I need a way of attaching it to a drill bit that is repeatable. Because I was like, I can just gaffer tape a can onto a drill bit, but no, that isn't what I want to do. I want to make it so I can do this a bunch of times. So one of those plastic lids, I think, is a bit of a game changer. And then I need some sort of 2-pack glue, and then glue that to a drill bit via, maybe a 3D printed sort of holder type thing, maybe. So I don't know if there's any 3D printing folk out there. I mean, if there's 3D printing folk that I can get involved, I could probably fabricate that whole lid with a drill, with a hex bit holder, and then we've got something like a product right there that I think could probably do well. Like we could just give out the file for free on the internet. Getting ahead of myself 100%. Here, Johnny. But I think...
and you're spoiling the video that is forming in my brain here, where Brad goes 3D printing.
Cut this out. Cut all of this out.
No, we'll keep it in and appeal to anybody. If you have a 3D printer and are very experienced at using it and think you could help us out, get in touch.
Yeah, man.
Get in touch. Right. Well, this podcast is getting away from... Well, it got away from us in the first 2 minutes, if I'm honest. But let's speed it along. So Brad did an incredible job. If you haven't seen it, Brad got the Cooper cooler, which manages to chill beer down to... ice cold refreshment in 1 minute flat. And then we came up with a hack that manages to do it in 3 minutes. And all you need is salt, ice, and a bucket.
And Teflon hands.
And Teflon hands. Or gloves.
Or
Brad,
gloves.
just gloves. Yeah. So should we dive into the comments and see what fun there was to be had?
Yeah, go on. You go first, because I feel embarrassed by the comments because they're talking about me.
Because they're all nice about you. Yeah.
Most of them. I think there's a couple of bad ones, but yeah.
Oh, I mean, there's always going to be on YouTube. So Nuno Alves made an interesting point, and a couple of other people did as well. And he says, I'd imagine the Cooper cooler wouldn't be a great tool for a beer that has a lot of sediment in, right? Say, for example, homebrews, which usually have a decent layer on the bottom of the bottle, all that spinning would just get mixed in, right? Yeah. So, a couple of points. Firstly, what we didn't show in the video is that you can put bottles in there. There's like a little bit at the end of the see-through plastic that pops out.
Yeah, you can put up to a wine-sized bottle in there, so anything's going to fit in there. That's no problem.
Yeah. So just on that point, so the actual spinning probably wouldn't be that much of an issue because the centrifugal force would keep it roughly in place, that sediment, but just lying it down, it will already have gone wrong. So yeah, it's not ideal for anything that's bottle conditioned.
No. Just to add to that as well, though, there is actually a setting on there that's no spin, which is probably a bit of a game changer. But obviously, if you've got sediments that are in the bottom, unless you've been storing it on its side, which why are you doing that? You shouldn't be doing that. But if you've stored it on its side, and then you put it in on its side, and then you don't spin it in the no spin setting, you're going to have.
And then you use a
really
lambic
cold
basket to keep it on its side while you pour it.
Yeah,
because I mean you can store beer on its side, and I know that people like Cantillon do, but our advice from our experience is do not lie it on its side unless you're going to age it for years and years and years and years, because then you'll want to keep the cork wet like you do in wine. If you're not intending to do that, then it's better off upright, and if it's got a cap on it, not a cork, do not lie it down, because the cap can start to corrode. So upright unless it's corked, and you're keeping it for 5 years plus is our advice there.
Yeah, man.
So yeah, it's not ideal for bottle conditioned or wild, very heavily sedimenty kind of beers. But equally, like Allagash White, it says, turn it upside down to get all the sediment in. So it's perfect for that. So, swings and roundabouts. Bradley, what was your comment?
I had a comment from Father F93 who said, a ride on the positivity train with Brad. Just what I needed. I always use the good old wet paper around the bottle trick. Maybe you could review those bottle resealers next. Forget the name, but keep it up. So yeah, we've got a sort of another Low Brau in the works, which is going to be about the best bottle openers in the world, and I think we're going to get some sort of resealing technology in there, because one of them might happen to be a kind of resealer as well, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll do some more research and see if there's some more resealing options out there, because I think, particularly if you're a lone beer geek in a house, or you don't have many friends that are into certain styles, that's the big barrier to 750s. I mean, my collection is almost exclusively 750s because I can't find a reason to open them. So having resealers is amazing, and we use the Hermitus, which we love, and have talked about endlessly. But there's probably other options we can explore as part of that episode for sure. So yeah, that is in the works. I love the phrase "the Brad positivity train," because I usually use the train metaphor about Brad going off the tracks. So it's good that the train has practical purpose too.
Ding ding, next stop positivity.
You sounded so dour when you said it. Right, yes, we've got a question this week. It's an involved question.
Yes, it is.
So I'm looking forward to tackling this one, and it comes from one of our Patreons, Josh Meller, who has actually appeared in a couple of episodes tasting our beer. So let's see what Josh has to say.
Hi, Brad and Johnny. It's Josh here, one of your patrons. This week I have a question about transitioning from homebrewing to commercial brewing. I'm currently in the process myself of getting a small brewing business off the ground, and I'm dealing with all the rigmarole that comes with that. I'm from a homebrew background myself. I've never worked in the brewing industry. So I wanted to ask you guys what your key tips were for people who are transitioning from homebrewing to commercial brewing. Great, thanks very much. Love and a bit.
Some people on our Discord forum called Josh the Chosen One because he has appeared in several videos, and he's sort of revered as a kind of Neo from the Matrix type figure in our strange little bubble we've created.
He is. That's how much fun it is, guys. All the bands.
Praise beer.
So Josh, thanks for the question. It's a great question. I think probably one that I've actually been asked it quite a few times. So I've got all the answers. So if I start, and then we'll come to Bradley for some design and philosophy thoughts.
Yeah.
But I mean, the first thing I'd say is that you need to find a niche, or you need to stand for something. So when I say stand for something, I'm not necessarily talking politics, although that has worked for some breweries. But it's having a thing that people know you for, right? Because that's how you're going to set yourself apart. And all the really successful breweries have always been known for one thing, whether it was like Beavertown with their artwork and Gamma Ray, or whether it's whether it will be Crossover with their fruit forward young beers, or whatever it's going to be. Just something that sets you apart is super important. Don't come out just making New England IPA or something like that. The best example I've had recently is Elusive Brew Co., who are a very small brewery, fantastic brewery, make a whole range of styles. But he's recently, Andy's just started to develop a reputation for making great West Coast IPA at a time when there's almost no West Coast IPAs that are really great and available. So that's sort of a great example of him realizing he's very good at something and running with it. And on that note, I'd always have one accessible core beer. And when I say accessible, I don't mean cheap and affordable and mass market. I just mean one that is of a sensible ABV, is of a sensible cost, and that you really dial in, right down to every single detail, and over several batches get it perfect, which is the steady rolling man approach. And, that's what wonders for Daya. And speaking to Theo, by doing that, he's learnt so much about his house yeast, so much about his malt and his hop suppliers that he applies to other beers. So it's not just a commercial decision; it's a practical one in terms of improving your brewing processes. The other thing is serve your local market first. If you can build up a local loyal following, they want to support you. Everybody wants to drink and eat local. So if you serve that need, you're going to create a constant market that you can rely on, so that when things go wrong, you've got champions there and you've got a constant sales thing happening. Whereas if you do, no shade on Verdant, it was tough to build a local market in Cornwall, but they managed to do that because their beer was just of exceptional quality. But mostly slinging it off to other parts of the world where you can't communicate, where you can't, keep going in there and checking on the quality of the beer that's being served and explaining to people the beer and having those conversations is going to be much harder. And the final thing is, don't enter price wars. Just, if a pub comes to you and says, I can get this for this price, you just go, that's cool, that's their price. Because as soon as you start dropping your price for certain customers, other customers expect it. And as soon as you drop it, it's very hard to put it back up. So value your beer at the price that it costs you to make and with the markup that you believe is fair. And if people don't want it, then, you may have to brew a different style or change the recipe or something. But don't compromise on the price. Stand firm and believe your beer is worth what it's worth. That's my advice from 4 years in beer distribution and 8 years of watching people make great decisions and lots of others make terrible decisions. Bradley, what about design? How do you stand out as a new brewery?
Well, all very sound advice first, Johnny. I think the most important thing that you've said there for me is about sort of building up a local fan base. So I think that goes without saying. If you're not like a Verdant where people are just knocking at your door to get any beer you crank out, you kind of need to establish yourself in your hometown, in your home area, and really, be a great place to go to. If you're going to have a tap room, make it a destination. People can taste the love you're putting into a beer. And if you're from that hometown or you've moved there, kind of immerse yourself in it and make the beer about where you're from. I think that's all really important. And, in terms of branding, it's very hard to stand out because there's just so much. We're just overloaded with stuff at the moment. So I think you can kind of, if you can find your own voice, in where you're from and, what style you're making. I think the other important thing you said, Johnny, was about, you can almost, if you've got that core beer, you can almost build a brand off of one beer. I often think that's the cleverest way to do something, is make something brilliant, make one of them that everyone wants it, and then that's your calling card. Like, that's your steady. When everyone goes, I want that, I know I like that. And then from there, that's your jumping off point where you can experiment and try all sorts of different things. Obviously, when you're founding a brewery, there's going to be loads of experimentation. You're going to try all different things before you hit on that. And that's all part of the joy and possibly the pain of, brewing and trying to sell your wares. But I genuinely think when you're starting a brewery, you need to have a great name. You need to have a great concept. The branding can come a little bit later, but it's super important. I'm not going to lie. It's a big deal. Like if you people don't want to pick the stuff up off the shelf because it doesn't talk to them, it doesn't shout to them, then you kind of already lost the battle before it's even started, because you're not going to get it in their mouths. So yeah, I think, you know, it's a tough game, but I think it's also a brilliant game, if you know, and a rewarding game. If you can get people to drink something you've made, I think it's super rewarding, man. So yeah, Josh, great luck to you.
You raise a great point there, just about how when you start a new business, whatever the business, but particularly in brewing, you're gonna make mistakes. And so, you know, you say when like the branding can come a little bit later, you know, if you're sat there and you're like, I don't really have a name I love, I don't really have a brand I love, I don't really, you know, you feel like it's not a fully formed idea yet. That's okay. Like, do some cool stuff, get it wrong every now and then, and you'll start to learn it, and ideas can start to crystallize. So not worrying too much about not having that striking identity at first is no bad thing.
I think it's like gold mining, yeah? So you're kind of chipping away at a big rock all day, every day, and you might feel like you're not getting anywhere, and you're like, oh, maybe I'll try this different technique of blasting the rock away, but like still not hitting gold. And then all of a sudden, you're near the point of giving up, and you just suddenly hit a vein of gold, and you've something that clicks in your mind, and you're like, right, this is what I'm doing, this is who I am, this is the beer I'm going to make. And it all just suddenly makes sense. But it's getting to that point, isn't it? And I think you only get there by struggling and by realizing what you shouldn't be doing to a certain extent. Or just experimenting like as much as you can, and working out what it is that you're great at, which is the other thing, is like, what are you good at? Play to your strengths, I think, is always the way to go.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I hope that helps, Josh, and all the best with Mella Brewing, I think it was.
Yeah, Mella, yeah.
Yeah. So Josh is there in our forum if you want to find out more about the brewery, but also we'll be throwing some support his way, because he's been a Patreon and a supporter, and indeed a co-presenter for many years now.
Right.
So yeah, wishing you all the best with that new venture, Josh. That's the end of this week's episode. We are back on Wednesday. We've got 2 videos in the pipeline. I don't know which one we're going to publish, so I won't tell you which one it is yet until I know. But we'll see you next Friday for another episode of Friday 5 p.m. Love and beer. The Bubble and Friday 5pm podcasts are brought to you by the nerds behind YouTube's craft beer channel. You can watch over 400 mini documentaries at youtube.com/the craft beer channel, and if you love what we do, support us via Patreon and get access to merchandise and our amazing Discord forum, a positive and welcoming space for everyone who loves beer, food and homebrewing. Love and beer.